The Black Forest Hospital was a beloved German medical drama that touched the hearts of audiences with its emotional storytelling and memorable characters. The talented cast brought the show to life, but sadly, many of them are no longer with us. Some passed away peacefully, while others faced tragic and unexpected ends. In this video, we honor 42 actors from the Black Forest Hospital who have sadly passed, celebrating their contributions to television and remembering the legacies they left behind. Stay with us as we look back at their lives and careers. Klaus-Jürgen Wassow played the esteemed Professor Klaus Brinkmann in 1985 at the age of 56, portraying a wise, compassionate doctor whose steady hand guided both patients and colleagues. Off-screen, his life was marked by personal and financial ruin. His first marriage to Jolande France ended bitterly, and his second, to actress Ida Krottendorf, was filled with infidelity and public feuds, leaving their 2 children caught in a hostile environment. His third wife, Sabine, whom he married in hopes of stability, left him when his career declined. Despite being a celebrated actor, he mismanaged his finances, amassing debt and declaring bankruptcy in 2003. A severe stroke in 2004 left him partially paralyzed, unable to work, and sinking into deep depression. Dementia soon followed, stripping him of his memories and identity, leaving him confined to a nursing home. Once adored by millions, he spent his final years in confusion and isolation, passing away on June 19, 2007, at 78, from complications of the disease.
Und weil ich diese Ziege rausgeschmissen habe, wird jetzt die Schenkung annulliert.
Nein, ich glaube, das ist ein wenig komplizierter.
Karen Hart played the gentle and nurturing Katie in 1985 at 75, a woman whose warmth and kindness brought comfort to patients and staff alike. Behind the scenes, however, her past was riddled with darkness. A star during the Nazi era, she had been forced to act in propaganda films, a stain on her career that haunted her for decades. She married twice, but neither union brought her happiness. Her first husband abandoned her, and her second, an alcoholic, drained her emotionally and financially. She never had children, and as she aged, loneliness became her only companion. Her later years were marked by declining health and the pain of being forgotten by the industry she had once served. In early 1992, she suffered a devastating cerebral hemorrhage, robbing her of speech and leaving her trapped in her own failing body. She died on March 5, 1992, at 81, her final days spent in silence and solitude, a heartbreaking end for a woman who had once been a shining presence on screen.
Aus bei ihm, da muss ich mal gründlich Ordnung machen.
Das würde ich nicht tun. Er will doch sein Leben selbst gestalten, nicht?
Hast du dich über ihn geärgert?
Evelyn Hammond portrayed Karsta Michaelis in 1986 at 44, a highly capable and compassionate hospital administrator who ensured the smooth operation of the Black Forest Hospital. In real life, however, her existence was much lonelier. Her marriage to actor Hans Walter Clausen ended in quiet devastation, leaving her emotionally guarded and unwilling to love again. She never remarried and had no children, dedicating herself to her career as a way to fill the emptiness. Though adored by audiences, she struggled with feelings of isolation and self-doubt, questioning whether she had ever truly been loved. In 2006, she was diagnosed with lymphoma, a cruel disease that rapidly spread through her body. She kept her suffering hidden from the public, continuing to work until she could no longer stand. As the cancer took its final toll, she withdrew from friends and colleagues, spending her last months in solitude. She passed away on October 28, 2007, at 65.
Aber bitteschön, an dem soll's nicht scheitern. Das kann ruhig weg.
Das würde ich begrüßen. Sie wissen ja, dass ich 8 Jahre im Hause an
Herbert Tinnegeik portrayed Dr. Laudan in 1988 at 51, a dedicated and skillful doctor committed to his patients' well-being. However, his own life was filled with misfortune. His acting career was unstable, marked by long periods of unemployment and financial distress. His marriage, strained by money problems, ended in an acrimonious divorce, leaving him estranged from his only son. He battled depression for years, struggling to find a sense of purpose outside of acting. In his later years, he withdrew from public life, retreating into solitude as his name faded into obscurity. By the time of his death on October 10, 2022, at 85, he had long been forgotten by the industry, his passing barely acknowledged, and his cause of death left undisclosed. A quiet and sorrowful end for a man once filled with ambition.
Ich verstehe es nicht. Ich habe versucht, ihm Mut zu machen, aber das war gar nicht notwendig.
Ja.
Der ist so zuversichtlich. Ich stehe vor einem Rätsel.
Ja, das wird auch.
Heideline Weiss played the dedicated and compassionate Dr. Elena Bach in 1985 at the age of 45, portraying a doctor whose life revolved around her patients, often at the cost of her own happiness. In real life, Weiss had a long and respected career, but fame came with sacrifices. She married a fellow actor, believing they would share a life of artistic passion, but his infidelities led to a bitter divorce, leaving her emotionally devastated. Unable to have children, she focused solely on work, yet as she aged, roles became scarcer, and she faced growing isolation. A battle with cancer in her later years left her physically and emotionally drained, with only a handful of close friends by her side. Despite her once prominent career, she spent her final years largely forgotten by the industry. She passed away from heart failure on November 24, 2023, at the age of 83, her legacy overshadowed by the loneliness that had consumed her final days.
Schwestern aus der Klinik.
Du wärst wohl umgekehrt nicht gekommen.
Carl Walter Dias played the composed and knowledgeable Dr. Schaefer in 1985 at 57, a figure of wisdom and authority. Off camera, however, he was a man plagued by anxiety and self-doubt, perpetually fearing irrelevance. Though he found success, he struggled with paranoia, convinced his career would one day vanish. His marriage crumbled under the weight of his insecurities, and he never remarried, instead isolating himself from those who cared for him. As he aged, depression and ill health took hold, with multiple illnesses sapping his strength. Pneumonia struck him in his final days, and without close family by his side, he succumbed alone. He died on March 30, 2014, at 86, his final moments spent in the silence he had so deeply feared, a tragic conclusion for a man who had once sought the admiration of the world.
Dass die Ehefrau noch nichts davon erfährt, ist nicht stabil genug.
Hannelore Elsner played the elegant and poised Maria Rothenberg in 1987 at 45, bringing warmth and sophistication to the role. In real life, she exuded the same charm but carried deep personal wounds. A highly sought-after actress, her romantic life was tumultuous. She endured multiple heartbreaks, including a failed marriage and a string of high-profile affairs. She had one son, but her relentless pursuit of success often kept them apart, leaving her with lingering guilt. As she aged, she fought fiercely to maintain her career, but the film industry's preference for younger stars left her with diminishing opportunities. When she was diagnosed with breast cancer, she concealed her illness, continuing to work despite her deteriorating health. She passed away on April 21, 2019, at the age of 76, her final days marked by the quiet loneliness that had followed her for much of her life.
Dafür danke ich dir auch. Schau raus. Schau raus, die Erde hat uns gleich wieder. Man kann nicht endlos schweben.
Raymond Harmstorff portrayed the determined and resilient Florian Brinkman in 1987 at 48, a role that reflected his own reputation as a physically imposing and strong-willed performer. At his peak, he was a beloved action star, famous for roles that required intense physicality, but behind the scenes, his personal life was unraveling. Diagnosed with Parkinson's disease, he struggled with the loss of his once powerful body, falling into deep despair. His marriages, marred by emotional instability, ended in separation, leaving him isolated. The media was relentless, painting him as a tragic figure, a fallen star unable to cope with decline. Public ridicule and health deterioration pushed him to the brink. On May 3, 1998, at the age of 58, he took his own life by hanging, unable to bear the humiliation and suffering any longer. His death was a stark reminder of how quickly fame could turn into a curse.
Ich habe eine Idee. Ich nehme dich mit nach Kanada.
Ernst Fritz Furbringer played the wise and respected Constantine Taubrecht in 1986 at 86, embodying a man of great knowledge and authority. Off-screen, his life was filled with the weight of history. Born into a turbulent Germany, he built a career that endured the war, but his past was always in question. Whispers of involvement in propaganda projects tainted his reputation. He was married for decades, yet his rigid nature made him emotionally distant, leaving his wife feeling trapped in a cold, loveless union. His children, resentful of his lack of affection, drifted away, and in his later years, he was left with only fading memories of his former glory. Refusing to acknowledge his deteriorating health, he stubbornly continued working until he no longer could. He passed away on October 30th, 1988, at the age of 88, largely forgotten, his death receiving little attention, his once commanding presence reduced to a footnote in history.
Wenn ich will, werde ich betreut. Wenn ich nicht will, werde ich in Ruhe gelassen. Naja, ganz billig ist die Geschichte natürlich nicht. Aber...
Dieter Epler played the meticulous and disciplined Dr. Newbert in 1988 at 61, embodying a man devoted to his profession, much like Epler himself. Despite a long career, true stardom always eluded him, leaving him with a sense of unfulfilled ambition. His marriage, once strong, crumbled as he prioritized his work over his family, driving his wife into the arms of another man. His two children, feeling abandoned, rarely spoke to him. As the years passed, roles became fewer, and he withdrew from public life, watching his former colleagues continue while he faded into obscurity. In his final years, he lived alone, plagued by regrets, his once busy career reduced to a handful of forgotten performances. He passed away on April 12, 2008, at the age of 81, the cause undisclosed, his death barely noted. A quiet and tragic end for a man who had spent his life chasing recognition that never truly came.
Dankeschön.
So ist das damals schön drunter lange.
Wolfgang Kiehling played the meticulous Dr. Ignaz Marker in 1985 at the age of 61, portraying a doctor whose precision and high standards often set him apart from his colleagues. Known for his intense performances, Kieling's career spanned decades in film, television, and theater, yet he constantly struggled with a sense of inadequacy, feeling overshadowed by other German actors of his generation. His personal life was marked by instability. He married multiple times, but none of his relationships endured, and his children, feeling neglected, distanced themselves from him. As his health declined, his once commanding presence faded. Diagnosed with cancer, he faced his illness alone, battling immense pain with little comfort from those around him. His body weakened rapidly, and the once energetic performer became bedridden. On October 7, 1985, at the age of 61, he succumbed to the disease, dying isolated and disillusioned, his legacy overshadowed by the struggles that defined his final years.
Du willst zu einem gerechten Ergebnis kommen? Du bist doch von vornherein gegen mich. Das musst du ja auch. Davon lebst du ja.
Gussel Bearhammer played the endearing Landstreicher Boris in 1987 at the age of 65, bringing warmth and humor to a character whose wisdom often surprised those around him. Off-screen, Bearhammer was a beloved figure in German entertainment, particularly for his role in Meister Eder und sein Pumuckl, yet his personal life was far from the cheerful world he portrayed. Though he remained married, his relationship was strained, and with no children, his home life was eerily quiet. As he aged, he struggled with worsening health, particularly heart problems that limited his ability to work. The industry, once eager to embrace him, gradually moved on, leaving him feeling forgotten. In his final years, he withdrew from public life, plagued by regret and loneliness. On April 24, 1993, at the age of 71, he suffered a fatal heart attack at home, passing away alone, a man once adored by audiences, now left to fade from memory. Karl-Heinz Vostero played the authoritative Professor Brieken in 1987 at the age of 60, embodying the role of a brilliant yet demanding figure within the hospital. His acting career had been distinguished, with key roles in German television, yet as he aged, he found himself gradually cast aside. Once a commanding presence in the industry, he struggled to accept his diminishing status, refusing roles he deemed beneath him, which only led to further isolation. Vostero never married and had no children, and as his career faded, so did his social life. His later years were spent in increasing solitude, his once grand home becoming a silent prison filled with memories of a past he could never reclaim. When he passed away on January 4, 2021, at the age of 93, his death went largely unnoticed. A quiet end for a man who had once demanded the world's attention but ultimately found himself forgotten.
Ich hätte damals nicht nageln sollen, was?
Ja, das finde ich auch. Ihre Frau hat jedoch,
Volker Eckstein played the dedicated Stefan Maluski in 1985 at the age of 39, bringing energy and determination to his role as a young doctor. However, in reality, his life was filled with disappointment. His career never flourished the way he had hoped, and he struggled financially, taking whatever roles he could find just to survive. His marriage ended bitterly, and he lost contact with his only son, a wound that never healed. As his struggles mounted, he turned to alcohol, hoping to numb his pain, but his self-destruction only pushed him further into obscurity. When he was diagnosed with cancer, he faced his illness alone, without the support of a family or a stable career to comfort him. He deteriorated rapidly, suffering through his final months in near isolation. On March 26, 1993, at the age of 46, he passed away, his dreams unfulfilled and his name quickly forgotten in an industry that had long since moved on.
Musst du denn ausgerechnet jetzt büffeln, wo ich zu Besuch bin?
Wann soll ich denn sonst büffeln? Du bist ja immer da.
Naja, ich gehe dann noch mal zum Herrn Professor.
Lola Muthel took on the role of the kind-hearted Frau Vollmers in 1988 at the age of 69, embodying warmth and motherly wisdom. However, her real life was marked by regret and deep-seated guilt. Once a rising theater star during the Nazi era, her career was forever tainted by her association with propaganda-driven performances, a past she could never fully escape. Though she married actor Hans Kannenberg, theirs was a marriage of convenience rather than passion, and they lived largely separate lives. They had no children, a fact Lola later admitted left her with a profound sense of emptiness. In her later years, she suffered from severe depression, haunted by both personal regrets and the moral weight of her past. As dementia took hold, she withdrew entirely from public life, spending her final days lost in a haze of fading memories and remorse. She passed away on December 11, 2011, at the age of 92, her name and legacy fading into history along with her.
Wie kannst du das beurteilen nach 2 Minuten?
Mit etwas, woran es dir total mangelt. Mit Instinkt. Außerdem, warum soll sie denn nicht hier sein, wenn sie deine Freundin ist?
Ralph Skermuli portrayed the hard-working Herr Muhlbauer in 1988 at 46, a man whose dedication to the hospital often went unappreciated. His own life echoed this sense of being overlooked. A respected stage actor, he struggled to translate his success into mainstream television, always remaining on the fringes of fame. His marriage to a fellow actress crumbled under the strain of financial difficulties, and after their bitter divorce, his ex-wife took their daughter, Sophie, to another country, cutting off almost all contact. Heartbroken and alone, he turned to alcohol, which only deepened his struggles. As roles became scarce, he fell into financial ruin, living in near poverty by his later years. Friends and colleagues distanced themselves, leaving him to spend his final years in quiet desperation. He passed away on June 2, 2017, at 75, the cause of death undisclosed. His passing barely made the news, a cruel end for a man who had spent his life yearning for recognition that never truly came. Klaus Biederstate played the charming Otto Heinzen in 1988 at 60, bringing effortless charisma to the role. Once a well-known film and voice actor, he had built a successful career dubbing Hollywood icons like Paul Newman and Marlon Brando for German audiences. Yet, as younger talents emerged, his voice was gradually replaced, and his once-thriving career faded into irrelevance. His personal life was no less tragic. His marriage fell apart due to his relentless work obsession, leaving him estranged from his only son, Thomas, who grew resentful of his father's absence. In his later years, Klaus was diagnosed with throat cancer, a cruel irony for a man whose career had been defined by his voice. The disease left him unable to speak, isolating him further in a world where he had already been largely forgotten. He spent his final days in a nursing home, alone and in silent suffering. He passed away on June 18, 2020, at 91, his once powerful voice silenced forever.
Ah, Senora Heinzen. Entschuldige, Schatz, jetzt spreche ich mit dir schon Spanisch. Na ja, kommt ja eben hier gar nicht weiter ohne Spanisch. Wie geht's dir? Ja.
Bruni Lobel played the kind-hearted Vermeterin Erna Mack in 1985 at the age of 65, portraying a woman whose warmth made her a beloved presence. Lobel had been a successful actress in her youth, but as time passed, roles became scarcer, and she struggled to maintain her career. She was married to singer Fred Rauch, but their relationship, while lasting, lacked the deep emotional connection she longed for. They had no children, and as she aged, she found herself increasingly alone. Despite her long career, she lived modestly, battling chronic health issues that left her physically weakened in her final years. She spent her last days in near isolation, with only a few close friends remaining by her side. On September 27, 2006, at the age of 85, she passed away from natural causes, her death marking the end of a career that had once brought joy to many but had ultimately left her forgotten.
Ist sie tot?
Das weiß ich doch nicht. Du rufst Krankenhaus an, die sollen schnell einen Unfallwagen schicken. Du und ruf auch gleich ihre Schwester mit an.
Wolfgang Büttner played the wise Fritz Lutz in 1985 at the age of 73, portraying a knowledgeable and respected figure whose wisdom often guided those around him. Büttner had a long career in film and theater, but he never achieved leading man status, a fact that left him deeply unsatisfied. Though married, his personal life was marked by emotional distance, and he spent much of his later years alone. Financial difficulties forced him to accept minor roles even in his 70s, struggling to maintain financial stability. As he aged, he was gradually pushed out of the industry, leaving him feeling abandoned and forgotten. In his final years, he suffered from declining health and increasing loneliness, with few visitors to keep him company. He passed away on November 18, 1990, at the age of 78, his death barely noticed by the press, his contributions to the industry fading into obscurity.
Ich gehe in keine Klinik. Ich will auch an keine Schläuche.
Harold Junke played the charming and quick-witted Herr Hugler in 1989 at the age of 60, portraying a man whose humor masked deep personal pain. In real life, Junke was one of Germany's most celebrated entertainers, but his career was overshadowed by decades of alcoholism. Though he starred in films, television shows, and theater productions, his addiction led to repeated scandals, arrests, and hospitalizations. His marriage to Suzanne Seow was tumultuous, constantly strained by his drinking and public humiliations. Their only son, Oliver, struggled with his father's instability and eventually distanced himself. Junke faced professional disgrace, financial ruin, and fading public sympathy as his addiction consumed him. In his later years, he suffered from dementia, leaving him confused and alone, no longer recognizing those around him. On April 1, 2005, at the age of 75, he died in a nursing home from pneumonia, his body weakened after years of alcohol abuse.
Was ist eigentlich mit dem? Ich meine, der redet nie, liest Bücher. Bücher wie Kraft für die Stunde des Todes, Tod und Sterben.
Nadia Tiller played the sophisticated and graceful Vanessa Bodenstedt in 1986 at the age of 57, portraying a woman whose elegance concealed a lifetime of regrets. Once one of post-war Germany's biggest stars, Tiller had a long and celebrated career, but as she aged, substantial roles dwindled, leaving her struggling to remain relevant. She was married for over 50 years to actor Walter Giller, but their marriage was far from idyllic, riddled with infidelity and emotional distance. Their daughter became estranged, adding to her feelings of abandonment. As the years went by, she battled declining health and the devastating effects of memory loss. Her final years were spent in a nursing home, where she was largely forgotten, a stark contrast to the glamorous life she had once known. On February 21, 2023, at the age of 93, she passed away from natural causes, a once beloved icon who faded into obscurity.
Sprechen Sie nicht mit mir wie mit einem Kind. Ich kann warten. Obwohl ich...
Karen Ball portrayed the resilient and determined Olga Kolb in 1986 at the age of 46, bringing depth to a woman who endured hardships with strength. Ball had risen to fame in German cinema as a young actress but struggled with fading stardom in later years. Her personal life was marked by heartbreak. Her first marriage to actor Helmut Lohner ended in betrayal, and her two subsequent marriages were equally tumultuous, leaving her disillusioned with love. She had 3 children, but strained relationships and personal conflicts led to estrangement, leaving her feeling isolated. Financial difficulties plagued her later years, forcing her into near seclusion as work opportunities disappeared. She withdrew from public life, tormented by regrets and loneliness. On November 26, 2024, at the age of 84, she passed away under undisclosed circumstances, her legacy overshadowed by the solitude of her final years.
Eins und will es nicht und die andere will eins und darf's nicht behalten.
Hat die Polizei schon einen Anhaltspunkt?
Hans Pache played the dignified Landrat Molnar in 1985 at the age of 76, portraying a character of unwavering integrity. He was one of Germany's most recognizable voices, narrating countless fairy tales, yet his own life was anything but a fairy tale. Though respected in his field, his personal life was marked by emotional distance, his marriage lacked affection, and his children rarely visited, leaving him to face old age with a sense of abandonment. His greatest passion, his voice, was taken from him in his later years due to illness, robbing him of the very thing that defined him. As he lost his ability to work, he withdrew from public life, sinking into a deep depression. His final years were spent in silence, a man who had once brought stories to life now left with nothing but fading memories. He passed away on February 3, 2002, at the age of 92, his legacy enduring only through the voices of long-forgotten recordings. Gunter Strack played the amiable taxifahrer Kombach in 1988 at the age of 59, embodying a warm and dependable taxi driver who often went out of his way to help the hospital staff and patients. Strack was a well-known German actor, celebrated for his strong on-screen presence, but behind the success lay a life of struggles. His weight and health issues plagued him for years, leading to diabetes and heart problems. Though he was married to Lore Strack, the demands of his career left little time for family, and they remained childless, a fact that reportedly weighed heavily on him. As he aged, his declining health forced him into early retirement, leading to severe depression and isolation. Once a beloved figure in German television, he spent his final years in seclusion, fearing he had been forgotten. On January 18, 1999, at the age of 69, he died from heart failure, marking a tragic end to a man who had once brought joy to millions. Ilse Page played the meticulous Frau Kombach in the Black Forest Hospital in 1988 at the age of 49, portraying a woman whose sharp efficiency kept the hospital running smoothly. In reality, her own life was far from well organized. Despite a steady career in German film and television, she remained in the shadows of bigger stars, never quite attaining the recognition she longed for. Her marriage to an unsuccessful playwright was marked by financial struggles, endless debts, and bitter fights. Their only son, Marcus, disillusioned by his parents' constant turmoil, left home early and cut off contact. As Ilse aged, she faced declining health, struggling with severe arthritis and progressive vision loss, making even daily tasks difficult. She spent her final years in near isolation, relying on the occasional kindness of neighbors. She passed away on June 19, 2017, at 78, with the cause of death undisclosed. Her departure went largely unnoticed, a quiet end to a life filled with unfulfilled dreams and lingering regrets. Camilla Horn portrayed the warm and motherly Frau Renz in 1985 at the age of 82, bringing kindness to a role that reflected the comfort she longed for in real life. Horn had once been a legendary silent film actress, rising to fame in the 1920s, but her refusal to collaborate with the Nazi regime led to her being blacklisted, shattering her career. After the war, she struggled to find roles and was forced to take minor parts, never reclaiming her former stardom. She never married, the great love of her life abandoned her, and she spent her later years in solitude. Living in poverty, she relied on friends for support as she faded into obscurity. The industry that once celebrated her had long since forgotten her. On August 14, 1996, at the age of 93, she passed away from natural causes, her final days marked by the loneliness of a star left behind by time. Who is your favorite character in the Black Forest Hospital? How do you feel knowing that the actors have passed away? Feel free to leave your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this content, don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell so you don't miss future videos. Thank you so much.